Breaking news, Hollywood didn't just get hit, it got shattered to the bone. In a jaw-dropping twist no soul saw coming, Maggie Baugh just crossed a line nobody dared. Right in the heart of a jam-packed courtroom, with blinding flashes and the world frozen, she raised a silver phone, and in one explosive heartbeat, exposed what insiders are calling the ugliest secret in Hollywood's past. This isn't gossip. This isn't chatter. This is war. The first message she exposed echoed through the courtroom like a ticking bomb. Keep her quiet. She knows too much. The entire room gasped. Reporters stiffened. Lawyers dropped their heads. And in that single heartbeat, the flawless fairy tale that had shielded Keith Urban for years ripped apart. Maggie didn't sound like a victim. She sounded like someone who'd been muzzled for far too long. With tears streaking down her cheeks, but flames in her voice, she declared, "They tried to break me. They tried to bury the truth. But tonight, they'll hear it all." Within minutes, the internet erupted like wildfire. Hashtag Keith's Dark Circle shot to the top of global trends. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, every corner burned with outrage, chaos, and disbelief. Leaked texts, cryptic initials, powerful names lurking in the dark. This isn't some routine celebrity mess. This is something bigger, something darker, something the world was never meant to witness. And now the silence that built an empire is collapsing live before millions. The courtroom is ground zero. The phone in Maggie's grip is the weapon, and the globe is glued to every frame as the truth rips through Hollywood like flames through dry wood. This isn't the end of a love story. This is the birth of a war. The entire courtroom went still. It wasn't just another celebrity trial. It wasn't just another juicy headline. It was the second the glossy, golden illusion around one of Hollywood's most guarded names finally exploded. Maggie Baugh, the woman no one believed would ever speak, had raised a silver phone, shattering everything. The world would never look the same again. Every reporter in that room felt history shifting. The instant that screen lit up, cameras erupted like lightning. The air grew thick, suffocating, tense. No one dared to breathe. The judge tried to steady the chaos, but you can't tame a storm once it's unleashed. The first text blazed across the courtroom's giant screen. Just a handful of words, yet they landed like a live grenade. Keep her quiet. She knows too much. The gasp that followed drowned out the judge's hammer. Eyes flew wide. A notebook crashed from the back. A lawyer stared at his desk like he'd already seen the ending. Maggie's hands trembled, but her voice stood firm. She spoke slowly, sharply, letting every word slice through the room. This is what they've been hiding. And just like that, the perfect image of Keith Urban, the glossy, untouchable icon, was torn apart live. For years, people whispered, rumors crawled through private halls, secrets drifted like shadows. But nobody ever dared to speak it. Maggie just did. And she didn't just call out Keith. The text held initials, cold, sharp, terrifying, that pointed to names every soul in that room instantly knew. Executives, managers, ghost hands pulling strings. The second message flashed, "Make sure she doesn't talk again." The silence that followed was bone deep. This wasn't about one star. This was about something far darker, something colossal. The kind of shadow network everyone swore was just a myth. The judge struggled to drag the chaos back, but reporters were already on their feet, hands trembling as they filmed every breath. Maggie inhaled hard, battling the tears. Her voice cracked, but never caved. "They tried to erase me. They tried to silence me. But they never thought I'd make it here." And then the third message hit like a bullet. "Delete everything. End it before she speaks." The courtroom exploded. Gasps collided with shouts. Someone screamed, "Oh my God." Pure chaos. A secret meant to rot behind locked doors had just blown up in the middle of a legal storm. And now nothing could cage it. Maggie didn't flinch. She stood there shaking but unshattered. Her eyes locked on the swarm of reporters, right through the cameras, and she declared, "This isn't just my story. It's bigger than me. It's about everyone they hurt. Everyone they thought would never speak." And right then, the internet erupted. Hashtag Keith's Dark Circle blasted to #1 worldwide. Within minutes, leaked screenshots flooded every corner of the web. Millions who once worshipped a polished, smiling face were now staring at messages that read like orders from the underground. TikTok creators began stitching Maggie's words. Twitter was in flames. YouTube streams ignited within seconds. Inside the courtroom, Keith Urban sat frozen, face drained of every ounce of color. He didn't speak, but panic screamed from his eyes. He'd spent years constructing a fortress around his life. Maggie just burned it to ash. Whispers rippled through the room. Those texts weren't even the worst part. That phone held more than messages. There were voice recordings, screenshots, backups, a trail of digital fingerprints aimed straight at those who'd hidden for years behind power, wealth, and spotless fame. Then came Maggie's breaking point. Hands trembling, she faced the judge and declared, "I was never supposed to be here." Her voice cracked with fire. "They made sure I'd never have a voice. But I survived. And I'm here to burn the lies down." Her words landed like a punch. The entire room shifted. This was no longer a trial. This was a reckoning. Reporters bolted from the courtroom, racing to be the first to set the world on fire. Helicopters swarmed overhead. Police surrounded Maggie with tight security, because what she'd unleashed wasn't just scandal, it was danger. As she stepped down those courthouse stairs, flashbulbs erupted like a war zone. Her face was wet with tears, but her jaw was iron. The phone in her hand looked small, but everyone watching knew it wasn't just a phone anymore. It was a weapon. A weapon that could destroy careers, crush the untouchable, and torch Hollywood like gasoline on open flame. Anonymous insiders were already stoking the blaze. They whispered the initials belonged to names so powerful, entire PR armies were being dragged out of bed to spin the story. But spin was useless now. The internet had already swallowed the narrative whole. Some fans still clung to denial. Some clung to Keith, defending him like blind loyalists, but most didn't. The messages were too sharp, too detailed, too icy. This wasn't chatter anymore. This was evidence. By nightfall, major brands were already slicing ties. Tours were postponed. Statements were drafted, erased, and rewritten in panic. Industry giants quietly disappeared from feeds. High-profile accounts slammed shut. The story refused to be contained. It roared through the world like wildfire. And at the eye of the storm, Maggie sat in a guarded room, flanked by lawyers and a handful of loyal friends. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't victorious. She just leaned in and whispered, "They thought I'd break, but I'm still here." That single whisper became the night's defining clip. Millions shared it within hours. Millions wept watching it, because this wasn't just a headline. It was the moment one woman brought an empire to its knees with a single phone. This was supposed to be Keith Urban's world. But now the narrative belonged to Maggie. And the truth was only beginning. The storm she detonated in that courtroom didn't end at the door. It erupted beyond it, louder, faster, deadlier than anyone imagined. Within hours, her face was everywhere. That silver phone, gripped like a loaded weapon, had turned into a blazing symbol of everything Hollywood swore would never see daylight. And Keith Urban, once wrapped in golden spotlight, now stood dead center in the biggest scandal of his life. The internet didn't just react, it detonated. Major outlets blasted breaking alerts every 15 minutes. Reporters stormed the courthouse like starving wolves. Tabloids howled about the shadow network, and news tickers looped her words like a war cry. "They tried to bury me, but I'm still here." It wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration of war. But what the world didn't know was that those courtroom texts were only the opening shot. Insiders close to Maggie whispered she hadn't even scratched the surface of what lived inside that phone. There were layers, buried files, encrypted backups, conversations between powerful men who thought their secrets were untouchable. And then came the first leak beyond the courtroom. A top outlet threw a grainy screenshot into the frenzy. A captured exchange between Keith Urban and a shadowy figure. Insiders whispered this unknown could topple projects, companies, entire careers. The line read, "Control the story. Silence her. If she speaks, we're finished." That single sentence sent Hollywood into full panic. Major names recoiled. PR squads scrambled overnight to patch holes. Some high-powered lawyers fell deadly quiet, and damage control calls flooded inboxes worldwide. Immediately thereafter, some agents disappeared without a trace. By midnight, anonymous Twitter handles began dropping fragments of the texts, just crumbs, but enough to keep the world wired. One message exposed an underground circle. Another whispered about cleaning things up before time ran out. A third mentioned a mysterious list. No one knew what the list meant, but everyone wanted answers. And that's when the hashtags blew up like a detonation. Hashtag Keith's Dark Circle smashed past 50 million posts overnight. People who once worshipped him were now ripping his image apart, frame by frame. Concert posters were shredded online. Old interviews resurfaced and were dissected like courtroom evidence. Fans stared back at his perfectly polished persona and saw something else, fear behind the grin. Inside Hollywood, panic spread like a plague. Those once untouchable were now frantically dialing lawyers at 3 a.m. Studio heads scrambled into emergency meetings. Streaming giants tore through contracts line by line. Nobody wanted to get scorched in the fallout. And then it got darker. A second phone surfaced. An anonymous investigator revealed Maggie's silver phone wasn't the only vault. Someone deep inside the circle had cloned every file. Two chilling words echoed through the leak: backup secured. Truth can't be buried twice, blazed across millions of screens. The internet lost its grip. And right at the burning center was Keith Urban, silent, invisible, but utterly exposed. For years, he'd been the golden boy, the flawless star, the picture of perfection. But now the world saw something else. A man trapped in the very web he spun. A man who spent years stacking walls, only to watch them collapse in seconds. Paparazzi swarmed every property tied to his name. Every car slipping out of his mansion was tailed. Every ex-associate became instant prey. Whispers about what Maggie held morphed into full-blown conspiracy storms. Some insisted she had recordings. Others swore she possessed explosive video proof. One viral thread claimed a network of encrypted chats with dozens of powerful names. While the internet roared like a beast, Maggie remained silent. No press conferences, no interviews, and that silence was louder than any statement. It terrified people more than a confession ever could. Silence meant power. And for the first time, Maggie wasn't the one being controlled. She was the one holding the leash. Behind sealed doors, Keith's legal team unraveled. Half pushed to settle. The other half wanted war. But how do you fight what's already viral? How do you battle something the whole world is tearing apart like a crime scene? Late that night, an audio clip appeared. It sounded shaky and muffled, yet the voice was unmistakably Keith Urban's. In the recording, a frantic man gasped, "We can't stop this. She has everything." Another replied, "Then burn it down before she does." That snippet pushed the scandal into full-blown nightmare territory. Suddenly, it wasn't only leaked texts. It brutally became raw panic, the portrait of a cornered man and a system completely collapsing under its own secrets. Fans who once screamed his name at concerts were now screaming online for answers. Major sponsors dropped their deals overnight. A global tour was quietly cancelled. His once loyal publicist resigned without a word. Meanwhile, Maggie's image transformed from unknown to the woman who set the world ablaze. Talk shows lined up invitations. Big publications dangled exclusive deals. But she turned them all down. Every time a camera found her, she looked the same, exhausted, tear-streaked, but unbreakable. And that only made the storm hit harder. By day 3, the scandal had moved far beyond music. This was about power. A shadow network that once thrived in silence was being dragged into the spotlight. Anonymous hacker groups stepped in, claiming they now held encrypted files tied directly to that same circle. Leaks started flooding hidden forums, documents, voice clips, secret memos. The narrative twisted from celebrity scandal to full-blown system meltdown. People weren't just talking about Keith Urban anymore. They were demanding answers. Who else is involved? How deep does this run? How long has it been buried? Maggie's single act in that courtroom had unleashed a chain reaction no one could contain. And through it all, Keith stayed silent. Not a single post. Not a single statement. But that silence didn't feel like power anymore. It reeked of guilt. It dripped with fear. It was the sound of a golden empire collapsing, brick by fragile brick. This was no longer about one man. This was about the rot beneath the shine. The network behind the curtain. The empire of silence finally facing its reckoning. And Maggie, she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was the spark that set the house ablaze. Day 3 hit like nothing Hollywood had ever faced. By then, the Maggie Ball leaks weren't just a scandal, they were a full-blown earthquake. Entire studios trembled. The industry's glossy mask was ripped clean off, exposing nothing but panic, buried secrets, and a flood of people scrambling to escape the wreckage with Keith Urban. Outside the courthouse, the streets were drowning in cameras. Inside, the air was so thick it felt like it could snap. Keith Urban sat rigid in his chair, dark circles etched beneath his eyes, his jaw locked tight like it might shatter. Just days ago, he'd ruled the world, a global star, adored, untouchable. Now he was the eye of a storm ready to wipe it all away. And then Maggie walked in. No glam, no PR armor, just Maggie. Her face was tired, her steps steady, her eyes blazing with that eerie mix of exhaustion and power. The crowd fell dead silent. Even the photographers who'd been yelling for hours went mute. She didn't need a single word to freeze the room. Her presence did the job. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something low. She nodded slowly, then she pulled out not one, but 2 USB drives. The room erupted in whispers. Keith's hands tightened into fists. His lawyer tried to keep it together, but panic bled through the mask. Maggie's voice cut through the noise, calm and sharp. I told you that phone wasn't the only copy. The judge barked for silence, but nothing could stop the tremor ripping through the room. One of those drives held everything. Every text, every recording, every whispered promise made in the shadows. The second drive, Maggie revealed, held the names, the infamous list the world had obsessed over for 3 relentless days. Reporters nearly fell out of their chairs. Court officials stepped forward to seize the evidence, but Maggie raised her hand and stopped them cold. Her voice shook, but held steady. Before I surrender these, I want every single person to hear this. Lights lowered and one recording crackled through the courtroom speakers. It was Keith Urban's voice, calm, icy, and bone-chillingly clear. If she speaks, it's over. I'll torch everything before she ruins me. The room erupted instantly. People screamed. Reporters fumbled and dropped their phones. Keith Urban's face went expressionless, as though the world had just peeled away his last disguise. His lawyer rested a hand on his shoulder, but Keith Urban shrugged him off. It was already far, far too late. The whole room had been nailed, everyone heard it. The internet detonated again. Within seconds, that cut of audio was everywhere, instantly across feeds. YouTube live streams surged to millions within minutes. TikTok flooded with live reactions, sobs, stunned headshakes, hushed murmurs, and wildly furious typing. He said it, he actually said it. Then, chillingly, the list dropped. Maggie handed the second drive to the judge, but she also had duplicate copies queued to go out the instant anything happened to her. Her team launched an encrypted countdown page online. If that clock hit 0, the full file would drop. No one could silence her now. The system that tried to crush her found itself trapped. Names began leaking. First initials, then full identities, famous producers, studio executives, influencers, people the public trusted, faces who smiled on red carpets, preached virtue, power and kindness, but thrived in a secret network that fed on darkness. Keith Urban's name wasn't just on it, he was at the very center. The texts, the recordings, the signatures, everything led straight back to him. The man who once sang love songs under spotlights now stood painted as the mastermind behind the whispers and silences that shattered lives. Outside the courthouse, fans who once waved banners with his name now held signs demanding justice. Former collaborators peeled away one by one. Brands scrubbed his face from their campaigns, and the once fierce fan base that would have defended him without blinking fell into eerie silence. And silence, that's the sound of an empire crumbling. Maggie's team dropped another bombshell. The drive didn't just hold private texts. It carried a signed contract, a deal inked years ago to shield the circle if anyone dared to speak. Their safety net. Their dark insurance policy. And now it belonged to her. Keith's head sank into his hands. Cameras captured the precise moment the mask shattered. The man who once commanded every room now trembled beneath the weight of his own sins. In a twist no one saw coming, Maggie rose and walked straight past him. She stopped just inches from his chair. The room froze. Air vanished. And then she leaned in, no mic, just a razor-sharp whisper cutting through the silence. "I warned you. You should have never underestimated me." That moment became the headline of the day. It looped on every platform, GIFs, reels, endless clips. The world wasn't just witnessing a trial anymore. It was watching a kingdom collapse in real time. Within 12 hours, major industry players announced their resignations. Investigations ignited. A streaming giant froze all of Keith's upcoming projects. His record label suspended him indefinitely. Even politicians were dragged into the storm as the fallout tore past the music world. And Maggie, she didn't run. She didn't hide. She walked out of that courthouse with her head held high, cameras flashing like thunder all around, the world chanting her name. She hadn't just spoken her truth, she'd burned the fortress they built to silence her. By nightfall, the dark circle wasn't a rumor anymore. It was the headline on every news network, the top story on every platform, marking the start of a reckoning Hollywood couldn't outrun. Keith Urban's mansion was swarmed by media. Friends who once stood proudly at his side now vanished into the shadows. He wasn't the star anymore. He was the emblem of everything festering beneath the shine. This wasn't the end of Maggie's war, but it was the chapter where everything shifted. The girl they tried to silence had set an empire ablaze. And as the final cameras pulled back that night, one sentence roared across the globe. She didn't just expose a man. She exposed an entire machine. The world shifted that night. The curtain fell, and Hollywood would never stitch itself back the same way again. And this is how the story ends, not with a whisper, but with a scream that shattered the walls of power. Maggie Ba didn't just speak. She detonated the truth like a bomb on the world's biggest stage. One phone, 2 drives, 3 words that thundered louder than any song, any lie, any cover-up. They silenced me. What once sparkled like a perfect fairy tale now lies like a graveyard of shattered names. Keith Urban isn't standing on a stage anymore. He's standing in the ruins of his own empire, encircled by the very shadows he thought would shield him. Those leaked messages weren't just texts. They were confessions etched in digital stone. And once the truth escapes, you can't erase it. You can't bury it. You can't run. The faces that once beamed under red carpet lights now hide behind locked doors. Deals are ashes. Reputations rubble. The internet saw it all, and the internet doesn't forget. Maggie didn't just fight for herself. She fought for every voice that was buried, every story chained in silence. She stood where no one else had the courage to stand. And she shattered their golden mask for the whole world to see. This isn't just a scandal anymore. This is the downfall of a system that believed it could never bleed. While Hollywood frantically scrubs the blood off its perfect stage, Maggie walks away with nothing but the truth. And that's worth more than all their power combined. So remember this moment. Remember this story. Because when the truth finally detonates, no one is safe behind the lights. No one.